Good evening, everyone. As usual, I'm the Jimmy Kimmel at the Oscars here. I'm your master or mistress of ceremonies. And with that, I get to introduce some of our wonderful supporters and friends who have been just stalwart in their support of the work at the Women's Center and who believe strongly in ending domestic violence. And the very first of those friends is Mayor Jon Mitchell.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. Good evening, everybody. I thought I had the, no, it's me. It's I control the microphone. Well, thank you for coming out tonight. We've got a good crowd. And, you know, as I look out, so for those of you who've been here before, you know that this is an event that we've done year in and year out. And, you know, it's sort of a mixed story in the sense that I think it's very heartening that, you know, the Women's Center and the efforts by city government have such popular support in the area of domestic violence. Because it's such an important issue for reasons that too many of us are familiar with. But on the other hand, that we have to have ceremonies like this speaks to the enduring problem. And it is the case that we in America, and we do this in New Bedford because we're tackling it our own way, but it is true that the problem of domestic violence is not unique to our city. It's a national problem, and it's one that's ingrained too much in American culture. We Americans are not the worst, but we've got a lot of improving to do, and we've got a lot of improving to do right here in our city. The way you get at it, the way we'll get at it in the long run, is to continue to raise awareness, to continue to cultivate a sense of seriousness and purpose around this issue. And that's what this event is all about. And that's what the Women's Center does day in and day out, working with D.A. Quinn, working with Joe Cadero, our police chief, and working with so many others in our community, my office, community services, and so forth, the city council, because it is a community problem that we have to tackle. And we will continue to have these events so long as people are raising their hands against others they love or claim to love, so long as we continue to see folks who are damaging the lives of family members, especially children. And so long as we continue to see, as we do so often in our police reports and in our emergency room, the effects, and at the Women's Center, the very tangible effect of domestic violence. We as a society have to put this to an end. And although we've made progress, we've got a lot of work to do. And the numbers speak for themselves. We issue a proclamation every year, and we try to update the information, and the information suggests, unfortunately, that although we're trending generally in the right direction, it's not nearly fast enough. The incidence of domestic violence here in New Bedford and around the country is still way too high to tolerate. So I want to thank all of you for coming out. I want to thank the great team effort that we have, and I want to thank in particular the work by Pamela and Rebecca and everybody at the Women's Center. What you guys do to focus our society here, focus our city on these issues is so important. And I won't go through the proclamation this year, in part because I can't really see it. But be that as it may, the message. Let's make the message clear from tonight's ceremony that we're not going to tolerate it, that we're not going away. And we're not going to stop until we've put an end to domestic violence. Thanks, everybody.
Oops, this always happens when I come up to the microphone after Jon. And the next person is also a tall person, so that'll happen again. He's tall in more than one way, though. In stature, of course. That's obvious, but also in his strong support of victims and work against domestic and sexual violence. And that person is our own District Attorney, Tom Quinn.
Thank you, Pam. I, too, want to thank the Women's Center for their fight against domestic violence, providing solace to women and children. Here's the bottom line. I'm not tolerating domestic violence. It's not going to go away. I've made it a priority in our office, and I'm happy to see some of our staff members here who are involved in the daily fight against domestic violence in the courtrooms, which sadly many of these cases end, but sometimes it's the only way to have accountability. The notion of people putting their hands on women and children watching it is not something that I accept or will tolerate. So what we're doing is targeting the bad and repeat offenders. It's all bad, but in terms of resources, people who repeatedly hurting women, the same women, different women, and children watching it. Because what's going to happen when children watch it? What do you think is going to happen? They're going to be the abusers of the future, or they're going to be hurt. I don't want to see that. I have a very soft spot for people who are subject to that and see it. It's not their fault. That's why the court system, what we do, working in conjunction with the police, Chief Cordero, the mayor's office, various organizations, to try to stem this. And while the progress can be frustrating at times, I feel our office has made progress in holding people accountable. Because when you're violently assaulting women, some of the assaults that I see make me sick to my stomach. That cannot stand. A civilized society cannot stand and let that go by without punishment. Because in the end, I'm out in the schools trying to assist in educating the younger people before they get involved in these dysfunctional relationships that are going to lead to it. But you know what? You want to break a woman's jaw, throw her down the stairs. If it's up to me, you're going to be held accountable and punished, because that's the only thing that has to happen at some point, separating that individual from a woman who's being hurt. I don't want to see her get hurt, physically or psychologically. So that's what we're trying to do. Thank you for coming, and we will continue this fight in our role with the other partners against domestic violence. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Tom. And the next person that I'm going to invite to the microphone is someone who holds a special place in the hearts of everyone at the Women's Center. This year, he was awarded by the Women's Center the Roberta Hirsch Service Award, which is a very important award named after one of our early board members at the Women's Center who was so extraordinary in her heart and her soul and what she gave to this work. So we don't give it every year. But this year there was absolutely no choice but to give it to Chief Joseph Cordero for all of his extraordinary support of our work through the years. We are so happy that he is our new police chief. He is a true community police officer. He has the connections with so many groups in the community, so many neighborhoods where that are familiar to him and where he's a familiar figure, that we really have great hopes for New Bedford and for ending domestic violence in our community. Please come, Chief Joseph Cordero.
Oh, thank you, Pamela. I want to thank everyone at the Women's Center for the work that you do. The entire staff. I am very familiar with what you do in the victims and the survivors and the lives that you impact. So I want to thank you very much for that. Well, thank you. I wrote a few words because it makes it a little easier for me. I'm going to ask you just to take a quick moment of silence with me in remembrance of Sabrina da Silva, who we lost this year to domestic violence. So if you just join me in a moment of silence in her honor and for her family. Thank you very much. Got to put on my spectacles here. Domestic violence is generally described as an abusive, violent, coercive, forceful, or threatening act, or a word inflicted by a family member or household member on another. The core driving force has been and continues to be one of power and control of one human being over another. There are people suffering from domestic violence throughout the world. In fact, domestic violence has been around for a very long time. The first case dates back to BC with Cain and Abel. And history tells us that domestic violence has been prevalent and most of human existence. The sad but interesting point, and yet encouraging fact, is that in thousands of years that humans have roamed this earth, the biggest strides in combating domestic violence has been in the past 60 years. Lost my spot, sorry. After all, it's not that long ago in this country that a man was allowed to beat his wife with a stick that was no wider than his thumb. Even today, there are cultures that lawfully support and encourage public beatings and murder for a variety of reasons, ranging from adultery to disobedience. I believe there's a direct correlation between domestic violence and other crimes of violence. This is a learned behavior for young children in the home, leaving a footprint that lasts them a lifetime in many cases. You see, I once was presenting to a group of domestic violence, and my co-presenter was a judge. And she made this comment: God doesn't make junk. And this is true. Kids are not born as abusers or susceptible to be victims. No, this is a learned behavior and continues to self-perpetuate as the cycle manifests itself. Earlier I said, the encouraging fact is how far we've come in recognizing the issue and creating a system to make a cultural shift. However, we have not come far enough. People, human beings, are suffering and dying. We have not done enough. What we need is love in these homes to break these cycles. We need to educate and illustrate love, compassion, and caring. We cannot and must not ignore the suffering of our neighbors, our co-residents of this great city. Historically, this city has led the country on many areas to include human rights issues. This city has an amazing charitable spirit of giving. We do need to care for one another. We need to come together as a city of one. We need the courage to call the police when a victim's voice is silent. Please do not stand idle. Instead, break the paralysis and call the police when you witness domestic violence. You need to be their voice and call the police. Silence does lead to violence. Information is the solution. We need to support these suffering victims and survivors and guide them to make their choice to leave and embark on a better life. We are all interdependent and know someone who has suffered or is suffering as a prisoner of violence in their own home. The ultimate measure of a man, according to Martin Luther King, the ultimate measure of a man is not where he stands in a moment of comfort and convenience, but where he stands at times of challenge and controversy. I submit to you that moment of challenge and controversy is when you see someone that is suffering, that you pick up that phone and you call the police. Let us educate our children by being the example that we want them to be. Talk to them about what is a healthy relationship, what is acceptable behavior. Show them that conflict can and must be resolved by communications and not by fists. Love has no place for power and control, and on the contrary, love is kind, it is tolerant, it's patient, it's forgiving. Batterers and abusers, my message to you is seek assistance that you need to stop the violence. And generally I preach tolerance. However, in this realm, there is zero tolerance, and we will arrest you and prosecute you. My brothers and sister officers in the Bedford Police Department, I thank you for the work you do every day in combating domestic violence. It is your work that is making a difference. Please keep these young children in mind and the victims when you investigate these cases. Leave no stone unturned, for these silent victims depend on you. My message remains the same as it did last year. To all the victims who are still under the bondage of power and control, know that you have a community that is able and willing to assist you. For the survivors of domestic violence, I applaud you for your courage and sympathize you with your pain. Please know that you too have a community that is committed to you and your continued recovery. I want to thank DA for all the work that he does in supporting us and prosecuting these batterers. Mayor Mitchell for supporting the police department in our efforts. And I want to thank you all in advance for stepping up when you see someone that is in need, that does not have a voice, that depends on your voice to pick up that phone and call the police. Call on their behalf. They can't do it. They're relying on you and me. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Chief Cordero, we really feel that we have a winning team up here with a great DA, a wonderful chief, and Mayor Mitchell, who has given his great support to us over the years. I would also like to bring up, if I believe I saw her come, Linda Morad, City Council President, to speak for the council.
She's right here.
There she is.
Thank you. Good evening. I want to extend my thanks to all of you for being here tonight. I'm joined tonight with you, with two of my colleagues in government, Councilor Martins and Councilor Ribeiro. Like you, we believe that domestic violence within the city of New Bedford, within the United States of America, has no place, and we, with you, will work to do our best to eliminate it. We are very fortunate to have the chief and the DA that we have, who support each other to prosecute these folks who are battering women and children within our community. But as Chief Cordero said, it takes a whole community to do this. So if you see something, please don't hesitate. Pick up the phone and call. It's better for us to be sorry that we called than to be sorry that we didn't call. And I look forward to the day when we don't have to have these kind of ceremonies here in the city of New Bedford, when there is no more domestic violence in the city of New Bedford. Thank you all for all your efforts. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Linda. Thank you. And it's interesting because the things I was thinking when I was thinking about today's ceremony were all reflected in the speakers you've heard before me. And really, the chief and our DA and our mayor have told you why it's important. So I'm not going to give you a lot more statistics. We know why it's important. We've talked about why, and now I will talk to you about the how. And the how requires leadership, which we have, but it also requires soldiers, and we are the soldiers. This is a war, make no mistake about it. It's a war that happens inside, but requires an outside solution. It happens in people's homes, but it means that neighbors and friends and relatives have to step up and get those victims help, have to make sure, as DA Quinn said, that children are no longer witnessing violence in their homes. And to prove that it's a sort of war, I will give you a few statistics, and that is that the statistic we used when we first started this fight years ago was about Vietnam. That in fact we could prove that more women lost their lives to intimate partner violence during the Vietnam War period than soldiers lost their lives in Vietnam. That's an appalling figure because there were over 58,000 soldiers. Now coming forward many years, we look at 9/11 and the war in Afghanistan and the war in Iraq. And guess what? It's no better. More women lost their lives to intimate partner violence in the period of these wars. So we have to look at this as a war and as ourselves as warriors in that war. And it's not an unusual thing, actually. I was thinking along these lines, and as I was driving to work, I heard about the women in Poland who are now fighting against and have fought against the terrible rules that work against women, their safety, and their advancement. And you know, when I think of all those horrible, inappropriate, and just horrid jokes back in the 60s and the 70s, I want to ask, how many Polish women does it take to change women's rights? Turns out, over 100,000, because that's who turned out in Warsaw for the Black Stripe Parade to advance women's rights in Poland. It started small. It started with an internet campaign, a click campaign that people say don't work. Well, they expected 20,000, they got over 100,000. They also had women who were teachers wearing black all day as they performed their jobs in solidarity. So these women are going to effect a change for women in their country, hundreds of thousands of them. So now I ask, how many of us will it take to change a society where domestic violence no longer occurs and is no longer tolerated? And the answer is every single one of us here, all of your friends, all of your relatives, all of your neighbors, everyone you can touch. And this is the month that we start the awareness every year, in October, Domestic Violence Awareness Month. And what you can do this month is fairly simple. Wear purple. I know you all won't wear a purple hat, although I would really like that, because then I wouldn't feel so alone. But you can all wear a purple pin. You can all wear, as some of you I'm seeing out here tonight, wear a purple scarf or a purple shirt, and explain to people why you're wearing purple. That is in solidarity, as the women in Poland did when they wore black. It is in solidarity of victims who have lost their lives to domestic violence and who are living in domestic violence every single year. As I said, it's an inside war. It takes an outside solution. We are the solution. Please be part of the solution. As Chief Cordero said, please pick up that phone if you think somebody is in danger. Call the Women's Center at the very least to see if what you're feeling may be true, not true, or if it's possible at all. We will tell you, call the police. You can also get help through our hotline and absolutely help victims find their way to the hotline and find their way to help. 999-6636, area code 508, so it's a familiar area code. You can call that hotline any time of day to get help for yourselves or for a victim of domestic violence. I encourage you to do that. I encourage you to be a warrior in this war. It is a war. It's about power and control, as Chief Cordero said. Well, what else is about power and control? Wartime. So think of this as a wartime. Think of yourself as a warrior, and suit up and come to the front and help us end domestic violence in our community. Thank you. I'm now going to call upon Mayor Mitchell. Before I do, let me remind you, this is just the beginning of the month. Towards the end of the month, on October 25th, we have our Domestic Violence Vigil and the Silent March. We invite you all to take part in that. It will honor and memorialize the victims who have died this year. We light this tree tonight so that we can all think about the victims who have died, but also those who are still living in domestic violence, and spread awareness. So, Mayor Mitchell, will you give the word?
Let there be purple light.
It's white light now.
Oh, it's white. Oh, I'm a year behind.
Yes.
All right.
Purple wasn't working.
All right, how about light the tree? There we go.
But this is to remember, as you drive by every night, you can see this now because it's white lights. Remember that it's for all those victims of domestic violence that are still living in violence and those that we've lost this year. And do your part. Come to the war. Help us fight. Thank you.
Families come in all sizes and shapes. Sometimes your friends are your family by choice, or sometimes you're just stuck with Uncle Charles. But what we know is that you want to protect the people that are close to you. But the flu can unravel everything. Your flu vaccine protects you and your family. No matter what draws your family together, protect yourself, protect your family. Everyone needs a flu vaccine.